Some people read, some people don't read. Remarkably, I bet more people don't read than do read. I find that troubling because readers, they make better friends, they make better citizens, they make better patriots, they make better relatives, they make better conversationalists, and they just overall make better people. Why? Because those people that read have chosen and decided that what's already up here is not enough. And so they must pour in more in an effort to be better than they were before they picked up the book. Now, the listing of the millions of books that are out there and narrowing it down to 11 is just silly because I've not read, a drop in the bucket of how many books are out there. But of the hundreds of books that I own, these are the ones that stuck out to me as I was perusing my shelves. So I pulled them off, and we're going to go list them in the ONeill. So, you know what to do. Fasten your lap belt, tighten your chin strap, and we'll see how this goes. All right, so these are in no way ordered except for like the last two. They're kind of my favorites. So I'm just going to throw these out here, and we'll go from there. Number one of my favorite authors of all time, and I could choose anything that he wrote, whether it's the Hells Angels that made him popular or Fear and Loathing, all that stuff. I find the Gonzo Papers to be some of the most exhilarating things that he ever put pen to paper on, or typed out at Owl Creek in his lodge. I just love the man. I love the way that he lived his life with just this devil-may-care, I'm gonna do it my way ethos, and it just came out so great. And when he reads, when I read what he wrote, it resonates with me, and it's something that I can just dig. I feel like I'm in the same room with him having a conversation. And this is just 150 or so articles about social, political, whatever. Some of it's satire, some of it's just mocking the world around him, which is really what he was good at. I just find Hunter to be an awesome dude. And this is one of my favorite books of his. Next is a more new person on the scene. This is Nick Offerman, who is politically divergent from me in a lot of ways, but he is a great writer with an excellent vocabulary, an excellent use of language, and I find that this is he's just really fun to read. I've got all three of his books. I think there's a fourth one that just came out, but I don't have it. But this is basically a bunch of people that some of which you've never heard of, some of them you have, like Eleanor Roosevelt or Washington. And he basically just talks about how great these people were as humans, as patriots, as whatever they're defined as. But great read, and it's one of those things that you can pick up and just skip to a chapter, and it really has no bearing on the rest of the book. So if you don't have time to read the whole thing, you do that. So the first two, starting with number 11. Hunter S. Thompson. Shaken, not stirred. 10. What did I just say? Nick Offerman. Did I spell it? Is it two N's? No, just one. All right, so there we have the first two in our listing. The next one is an awesome book, Atlas Shrugged. Ayn Rand, man, she's so cool, dude. The Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged are her two best things. I think this is just the best book ever. And if you don't understand what's going on in this world, politically, economically, socially, everything else that does with business and politics and everything, read this massive book that's like 700 pages, 1164-ish, something like that. Takes a while, but God, she was brilliant. She was so far ahead of her time, so advanced. Even the three-part movie that they built around this book was actually pretty good. But gosh, this is just, it's if there could be a soothsayer that was also an author, it would be Miss Rand. She had it going on, and she knew what she was talking about. And this book is just a great fictional account of what we're doing right now. So Ayn Rand is numero nueve. For the next one, and again, not in any order, I'm just listing them so that we have them listed. Huge I'm a huge NBA fan, not so much as I used to be, but I've kind of dropped off in the last 4 or 5 years because I don't have cable, and ESPN kind of puts a damper on being able to watch games. But I find this absolutely excellent appendix, something that just helps you understand basketball better. And Bill Simmons is so brilliant when it comes to the world of basketball. I got this in 2009, which probably is when it came out. And he's got all these, like, what if this had happened? And let's change these rules. And he, gives this listing of, like, the greatest players and why they are what they are. And, I mean, it's 600-700 pages long probably. And it's just awesome. I couldn't put it down when I read it. So, awesome book. If you like basketball, that is the basketball book that you should read. So I will be putting Bill Simmons, whipping Simmons like a pastry, on the 8th of the ONeill. Next, I don't read a lot of fiction, as I've stated, but I love the late Dan Jenkins. He just writes about golf mostly, and he's so cool. This is the money-whipped, steer-job, 3-jack give-up artist. And it's just a fictional account of a professional golfer on tour, which sounds completely boring, but I'm telling you, the way this dude writes and the way he puts dialogue down on paper, it's second only to Cormac McCarthy. It's just so cool. And I just love the stories that he tells. And this is the first book that I ever read by him, but also my favorite. It's a really light read, as it were, but he's just one of these dudes that probably smoked a carton of Winston's before lunch and drank a bunch of coffee and sipped on some whiskey and just wrote great books. So I'm putting him down as my 7th on the ONeill. Number 7, Dan Jenkins. Seriously though, if you haven't heard of him, and if you even remotely like golf, great book. This one is probably the most recent one I've read in here, and I could not put this down. Found this out on Rogan. A dude named Tom ONeill. He spent like 20 years writing this book. Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. I am a very, very, very well-versed in the Manson family and the saga that ensued, Vincent Bugliosi, all that. I can talk about it for hours. I know what I'm talking about. I've read Helter Skelter many times. I've read other books. I've researched it myself. It's just an interesting time to have been alive in the late 60s and all that stuff was going on in there. And it's just an intriguing story. And after I read this, man, it put an asterisk next to everything that I thought I knew. I can't tell you enough about how dirty the CIA is. We can go in for a long time about, how the CIA more than likely killed both Kennedys, MLK, Malcolm X, all those guys. It's just a different world that we live in today. But this book is, it's eye-opening as to the dirty pool that our government plays against its own citizens. And what they do with Manson, very intriguing. And completely buys into it. I mean, you read it and you're like, makes sense to me. I don't know why it wouldn't be true. So I'm putting Tom ONeill, 2 L's. Yep, 2 L's. The double L in Spanish, he would be Tom O. What is it? I don't know how you pronounce that one in Spanish. But anyway, the next one, I grew up, as many kids did in the 80s, reading a lot of Stephen King just because I liked horror stuff and that was the thing to do. But of all his books, I find this one to be the most compelling. It's called On Writing, and I like writing. I've always enjoyed writing, so I consider myself a writer. And this is a great insight into the kind of methodology that he uses to compose his prose. It's called A Memoir of the Craft, and no truer words have been written. That is, it's just a really neat way to kind of encapsulate what it takes to write. You got to make yourself do it, and some of the stuff that lends credence to developing your own voice in the written word is just a really good book. Solid, but not typically what you would consider Stephen King as being the greatest writer about. Mostly people would pick It and The Stand and all that stuff, and they're cool and all. Don't get me wrong, but I really liked that when I read it. This one is, read this a year or so ago when it came out, or I think it came out then. Grisly, to say the least. This is called The Butchering Art, Joseph Lister's Quest to Transform the Grisly World of Victorian Medicine. Late 1800s, basically goes through the history of how we got to where we are now with surgery, and how everybody believed what they thought, why people kept dying all the time from infection and everything, and people weren't washing their hands, and just simple stuff to that, just to his, to Joseph Lister's techniques, and the things that basically just created what we have today in modern surgery and modern medicine. And it is a brutal look into surgery. I mean, you'd have to have 8 leather belts in your mouth biting down for some of the stuff that they did to people in these books, or in this book. Really interesting tales, and just nasty. I mean, just go ahead and kill me now as compared to some of the stuff that they would have put me through with this. So Lindsey Fitzharris, and I want to say I got turned on to that by Joe Rogan too. I think she had him on there, or he had her on there, I think is where I found that. But I found it, and I read it cover to cover in no time whatsoever, because it is just an amazingly cool Libra. All right, we're down to 3 more in the top 3. Manhunt. There are like 30,000 books written on Abraham Lincoln, his assassination, his life. I just read a book not long ago about his final murder trial, because he was a prominent lawyer in Illinois, where he lived and everything before he rose to prominence in politics. But this is, of all the ones that I've read about Lincoln, it doesn't really focus on his leadership or anything like that. It's basically just on the manhunt for trying to find the guy who killed him, Learned a lot of stuff about Booth in this. I didn't realize he was such a popular character. Like, everybody knew him. It's like Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt walking around. But awesome story. It basically just takes you on this journey from the moment you get there, and everything that would have played out. I mean, the murders that they tried to propagate that evening that didn't pan out, aside from Lincoln's, would have been just catastrophic to the presidency. Andrew Johnson, the Secretary of War, just some great stuff. But it's a great tale, and it tells in harrowing detail all the things that went through the 12 days where they were chasing him down. And James Swanson did a great job with that. James Swanson, Esquire. I don't know if he's an Esquire, but he is tonight in my book. The second one I've got, I don't know where it's at. I must have loaned it to someone, and I don't usually loan things because they don't come back as evidenced by the fact that I don't currently possess it. But it is this one. It's Fast Food Nation by Eric Schlosser. I love all his books. He's got the one, I can't find it either, where he's basically talking about the rise of the pornography industry, talking about migrant workers, like working strawberry fields and stuff like that, and then the illegal marijuana trade, and those 3 things and how they come up. That's probably my favorite, but what got me going with Schlosser was Fast Food Nation. When I watched Super Size Me, a lot of that stuff was kind of compelled by Schlosser's research into fast food and everything. And man, just the tale that it tells of kind of the behind the curtain story of everything that goes on in the food industry, and where it's taken us to being these fat lards of crap, and everything unhealthy about our world. Very good guy, but he does his homework, man. He spends years writing a book. I alluded in one of my other videos that he's currently working on one about the prison system, which I can't wait to see. And that has been in the works for the better part of a decade. So hopefully any day now, we'll be reading that one. So before I go on to my absolute favorite book, I'm going to give 5 quick, that's right, honorable mentions. Kitchen Confidential. Anthony Bourdain, love the dude. A lot like Hunter S. Thompson, just kind of did stuff his way. They're just real Sinatra type people, I love the way he was so eloquently spoken. He writes really well. I loved the shows that he did. The dude had the greatest job ever. He rises up from a lowly chef, as it were, to basically trotting around the globe and going and eating crazy food and dealing with weird people and cultures and all this stuff all across the world. I can't think of a better job other than late night TV host that would be more fun. But this was his initial foray into literature, called Kitchen Confidential, where I hadn't read it in a long time, but he basically starts off with his career. I think he started up in like the upper East Coast, the Northeast, like Nantucket or some one of those type of islands places where he's working at like a seafood restaurant or something, and he works his way over to the big city and talks about how hard it is and all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes and in kitchens and everything. And it's just really well done. And if you've ever worked in a kitchen, you can relate to a lot of this stuff, as most of us have. The next one is just a fun read by Brock Yates, the late Brock Yates, the editor of Car and Driver, I think it was. This is the Cannonball, World's Greatest Outlaw Road Race. Loved the movie as a kid. Just watched like a 50-minute piece on the Cannonball Lamborghini. And that particular car, and it went over everything in the car. And they made a couple really interesting points talking about, that movie was the first time anyone had ever seen or heard a Countach. And yet one of the most iconic, crazy looking cars of all time that people knew about. I mean, there were obviously ones before it, the Mura and a Jaguar E-Type, just some cars that obviously predated it. But the Countach is what came into prominence in people's eyes of, man, this is a supercar and this is what they look like and holy crap. And that first like 3 or 4 minute chase scene from, they're chasing that Trans Am police car. There's 2 chicks in that car. I mean, I could watch that all day long. It just sounds so evil, man, that car winding out. That V12 going 188 miles an hour or whatever. Just phenomenal. And this is the story of the original Cannonball. Little known fact, the ambulance that was used in the first Cannonball movie was one of the original vehicles used. And a lot of the stories taken from Cannonball Run that both Hal Needham, Brock Yates, and Burt Reynolds put together later in the first movie. We're not counting the second one. I don't remember what the crap that one's about. But the first one, a lot of those stories were taken exactly as it was. They hired a doctor. Yates' wife played the patient of Farrah Fawcett's character, and all that stuff. And all that stuff happened. They got pulled over by Pennsylvania State Police and all this stuff. And it was a senator's wife, and they've got to get her, and blah, they can't fly and all this stuff. But just a great read. If you like cars, if you like motors, and just being a gearhead, and just some of the cool stuff they did, really neat. And, the Cannonball has gone on, the VinWiki, master, Ed Bolian, has gone back and broken the record, and then people have broken his record. There have been a lot of people that have done it since. But this was the original, and it's just a great tale back when speed limits didn't really matter like they do now. And it's just one of those things that'll never happen again. But instead, it's a great story. I alluded to this in my CD talk, Dark Days by Randall Bly. I've heard Blythe and Bly. I don't know which one it is, but vocalist, lead singer of Lamb of God. Basically, he goes over to the Czech Republic in a concert. Kid stage dives off the stage, ends up dying later on, like gets in a coma, whatever, a couple weeks, whatever, passes, days, I don't remember, and he dies. They don't know anything about it. The band goes back on tour like a year later. They stop him at the airport, and he gets arrested and put in like one of the worst gulag prisons in the Czech Republic. And he gets charged with, capital murder or whatever it is over there for the kid dying. And because he's the lead singer, he's the, leader of the band, and basically just screeches the brakes on the whole tour and everything. And he sits in jail for, whatever it was, 9 months. I don't remember what it was, how long he stayed, but it was a long time. And didn't know what was going to happen, whatever. Well, the crazy thing about it, and what I really love about him, is not only is he just a really prolific writer, like he's really good at writing. He's not just some dumb lead singer. Just really introspective dude. And he talks about all these people he meets. He can't communicate with them because he doesn't speak their language and all this stuff. But they finally give him bail, and he's able to go back to the U.S. And all he had to do was never go back to the Czech Republic, and they weren't going to, extradite him back or anything like that. He could have avoided the whole thing. But what does he do? He owns up to it like a man, deals with it like an adult would deal with it, and turns himself back in for the trial, basically, knowing full well that he could have done life in prison for the rest of his life for that case. But he knew he didn't do anything wrong, and he had to clear his name, and I totally admire that. I find that to be just the most compelling example of leadership in an adult that I can find. And it just so happens they're one of my favorite bands. So awesome read. Even if you don't like metal, don't let that stand in your way. It's a great book. Because it's such a great story. Renegade History of the United States. Thaddeus Russell. I think I found this listening to this guy talking to Ben Shapiro, I want to say. And I was so or it might have been Rogan, I don't remember. But it was so compelling, the stories he was telling. This is basically that that thing that you should have gotten in school, because it basically tells what really happened in the history books, not that watered down horse crap that they feed you in government school. Really cool. It tells you a lot of stuff that you didn't know, and gives you a completely different insight into how this country was constructed and where we came from and our roots and everything like that. Really, really good. And the last one I'll throw in as an honorable mention is my favorite basketball player, is Pistol Pete Maravich. I love biographies, autobiographies, whichever. This is just a great tale of a man who was taken too soon but died playing basketball, which I think is kind of cool. Just a pickup game, he drops dead. Amazing story. A Raleigh kid from North Carolina, makes big, goes and plays for the Jazz and later the Celtics, goes and sets all these college records at LSU. Just a phenomenal person, phenomenal story of redemption, alcoholism, all the stuff that, and just hearing the stories of like the NBA in the 70s was really neat. So I found this book really, really neat, and not only that, but I really enjoy the man. So before I go to my final pick, I'm going to list James Swanson and then Eric Schlosser, if I can spell his name right. Yeah, I think I got it right. And then I will go ahead and write down the last one with all these double consonants. And this is my all-time favorite book. It's kind of a weird book because it's not typical format. It's something that it's not, Leaves of Grass or anything, but you can pick it up and just flip to a page and just start reading, and it doesn't matter. And that's what I like about it. It's called Tribe of Mentors by Timothy Ferriss. And what this is it's considered, they call it short life advice from the best in the world. He finds athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, inventors, mathematicians, just all these brilliant people that have just made great successes of their lives. And this is a 2017 book. And he goes through, some of them you'll recognize, most of them you don't. Most of them you have no idea who these people are, but it doesn't really matter. And he asks them several questions in the book. For example, what's the book or books you've given most as a gift and why? What purchase of $100 or less has most positively impacted your life in the last 6 months or recent memory? How has a failure or apparent failure set you up later for success? What are bad recommendations you hear in your profession or area of expertise? In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life? There's 11 questions. The don't say, it's kind of funny. No, it's not funny. The don't say is where it's at. So, and you basically go through, and some people answered them all, some people answered a couple of them, whatever. And it doesn't matter where the person comes from or what you know about them or anything like that. It just matters that their advice is really cool. They've obviously succeeded at whatever forum they've decided to enter into in this world, in this life. And because of that, you can trust that they got there somehow. So I value this book greatly. I've given it as gifts myself. And I think it's just so introspective. And it's neat seeing the different opinions of people, as you move through different careers, different walks of life, that kind of stuff. So, Tribe of Mentors, Timothy Ferriss. He's got one other book that I recently bought. I think he's got 2 or 3, but I bought another one recently that I'm still working on, and just a great writer. And what's funny is he's not really writing. He just came up with 11 great questions and copied what they brought him. So neat idea for a book, and it's really, if you need like a pick-me-up or something to kind of get you motivated and dump your clutch and get things rolling again, I find this book to be really true, and it fits the bill for that. So that is my don't say list of favorite books in no particular order, with the exception of the bottom 2 probably. If any of these strike your fancy, as they should, they still sell them on Amazon because I don't think there's any bookstores left in this world. So there's that. Giddy up.